Tonight, anti-Semitism on campus.
I do not feel safe.
Congress set to investigate some of America's most prestigious colleges and universities. Plus, the latest in the Israel-Hamas War. Hunter Biden indicted again. As we remember a tradition 800 years in the making this Christmas.
St. Francis of Assisi went to Bethlehem and was moved by the nativity scene and wanted to help people to understand what it looked like.
A look back at the first nativity scene. All this and more tonight on Faith Nation. A surge in anti-Semitism on college campuses met with a congressional investigation. Good evening in Washington, I'm Jenna Browder. 3 elite universities are facing across-the-board backlash after their respective presidents failed to condemn anti-Semitism on campus. The presidents of Harvard, Penn, and MIT were in front of a House committee, and now their schools will be under more congressional scrutiny in the fallout from their comments. CBN Capitol Hill correspondent Matt Galka has tonight's top story.
Specifically calling for the genocide of Jews, does that constitute bullying or harassment?
If it is directed and severe or pervasive, it is harassment.
So the answer is yes.
It is a context-dependent decision, Congresswoman.
It's a context-dependent decision. That's your testimony today. Calling for the genocide of Jews is depending upon the context. That is not bullying or harassment. This is the easiest question to answer yes, Ms. McGill.
This exchange from earlier this week led to an uproar over how elite universities are handling anti-Semitism on their campuses. The presidents of Penn, Harvard, and MIT could not say the calls for genocide of Jewish people violated their codes of conduct. The calls for the presidents to resign have been rolling in, and so have the apologies.
I was not focused on, but I should have been, the irrefutable fact that a call for genocide of Jewish people is a call for some of the most terrible violence human beings can perpetrate. It's evil, plain and simple.
Second Gentleman Doug Emhoff singled out the exchange at the National Menorah lighting to mark the start of Hanukkah.
We've seen the presidents of some of our most elite universities literally unable to denounce calling for the genocide of Jews as anti-Semitic. That lack of moral clarity is simply unacceptable.
The 3 universities now face a congressional probe over how anti-Semitism is handled on their campuses. Congresswoman Elise Stefanik called the testimony, quote, pathetic and morally bankrupt in a statement announcing the investigation. It's still possible some of the presidents are forced to resign because of their answers to the committee earlier this week. Meanwhile, the committee said they will not hesitate to use subpoena power during the course of the investigation into the 3 schools. Matt Galka, CBN News.
All right, thank you, Matt. Well, Tyler Coward with the Foundation for Individual Rights and Expression, or FIRE, joins us now for more. Tyler, welcome. So I want to talk to you about these universities coming under investigation, but first, just your reaction to this anti-Semitism we're seeing on college campuses.
Well, thank you for the question, Jenna. It's really great to be here, and thanks for having me on. There's no question that there's been a lot of, strife and anti-Semitic conduct on our campuses since the October 7th attack. FIRE, as a free speech organization, has been concerned, however, from some of the calls for increased censorship of protected expression on our college campuses. And the hearing on Tuesday and subsequent investigations of these institutions may result in more censorship or at least chill protected expression occurring on our campuses.
Yeah. These are some of the most prestigious universities in America: Harvard, MIT, Penn. There are others as well. But what does it mean to you that those 3 specifically are now subject to congressional investigation?
Well, Congress certainly can and has a moral mandate to investigate allegations of any sort of discriminatory conduct occurring on our campuses, including anti-Semitism, especially when those allegations appear to cross a line from protected expression to unprotected conduct. But like I said, in the course of this investigation, this congressional committee and the Department of Education, which has also launched their own investigations into several schools, must be very careful that they do not chill protected expression or encourage these institutions to crack down on speech that is protected by the First Amendment.
So there are now calls for the president of UPenn to resign, Tyler. Do you expect more calls for university heads to be forced out? And also, donations are already going down.
Well, I think on college campuses, these issues on these campuses are bigger than just one individual. It's bigger than just the president. And had institutions throughout the past several years, when we've seen these institutions crack down on protected expression outside of this context, for minor violations, for microaggressions, those sorts of things, I understand why people are deeply frustrated by these presidents' lack of empathy for Israeli or Jewish students and their lack of response. But the thing here is that we should not be encouraging them to censor more by pointing out past censorship. We should be holding them to these newfound promises of free speech on their campuses. And that's where we should be heading here, not calling for more censorship. In fact, Republicans and conservatives and Christian students, students of faith, should be very concerned by calls to empower campus administrators to crack down on speech, because frankly, if institutions do have that authority, we'll see an incredible amount of censorship targeted against those students themselves.
Yeah, it's a slippery slope. All right, Tyler Coward with FIRE. Thank you so much. Great to meet you.
Hey, thanks for having me on, Jenna. Thanks so much.
Well, 2 months after the October 7th massacre, Israel is facing pressure over the increasing number of civilian casualties, even as the Israeli military makes major progress on the battleground. As the fighting intensifies in southern Gaza, President Biden called Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu and Jordan's King Abdullah to increase humanitarian assistance to Palestinian civilians in Gaza. The president emphasized the critical need to protect civilians, provide corridors to safe zones, and separate them from Hamas. All of this as the Israel Defense Forces reports striking some 450 targets in the past day, capturing hundreds of suspected terrorists.
Fighters of the IDF and the Shin Bet arrested and interrogated hundreds suspected of involvement in terror activities. Over the past day, many also surrendered. The intelligence we are gathering during the interrogations serves us during the continuation of the fighting.
The intelligence gathered may help the IDF know more about the 138 hostages still inside Gaza. The IDF has also announced the killing of 2 high-ranking Hamas intelligence terrorists. Israel claims the terror group is firing rockets out of safe zones. Back here at home, new federal charges for President Biden's son. Hunter Biden is facing more charges, this time related to tax fraud and evasion. CBN News Washington correspondent Hillary Powell is tracking the allegations. Hillary, how much money are we talking about?
Well, Jenna, these latest indictments accuse Hunter Biden of avoiding paying $1.4 million in taxes while spending millions of dollars on a lavish lifestyle. Now, these are 9 tax-related charges in California handed down by a grand jury. Special counsel David Weiss accuses Hunter Biden of failing to pay those millions of dollars in taxes between 2016 to 2020 after earning more than $7 million during that time. Prosecutors write that Hunter, quote, spent this money on drugs, escorts, and girlfriends, luxury hotels and rental properties, exotic cars, clothing, and other items of a personal nature. In short, everything but his taxes is what they say. Now, prosecutors say, again, this took place between 2016 and 2020. They also accuse Biden of evading assessment of taxes for tax year 2018 when he filed false returns.
Hillary, do we know anything more about what this money was allegedly spent on?
Well, in these charging documents, prosecutors took steps to really break down what Biden allegedly paid for instead of paying his taxes. Now, take a look. Some of the highest costs include more than $1.6 million in ATM cash withdrawals, more than $683,000 in payments to various women, $400,000 nearly on clothing and accessories, and an eyebrow raising nearly $190,000 on adult entertainment, and also more than $70,000 on drug and alcohol rehab. We have reached out to Biden's attorney but have yet to hear back, but he did issue a public statement saying that he is accusing counsel David Weiss of bowing to Republican pressure in the case. Now, if convicted, Biden faces a maximum penalty of 17 years in prison. Now, actual sentences for federal crimes are typically less than the maximum penalties. A federal district court judge will ultimately determine what sentence is handed down. And Weiss says the investigation is ongoing. We will be tracking the outcome of this all, Jenna.
All right, Hillary, thank you very much. Well, good economic news on the jobs front coming up, what that means for the Fed's plan to combat still persistent inflation. Welcome back. The November employment report is out, and it shows a strong jobs market. The U.S. added 199,000 jobs last month, and the unemployment rate fell to 3.7%. The strong labor market report comes as the University of Michigan's Consumer Confidence Index surged to 69.4 points. Inflation easing off this year amid the Fed's continued interest rate hikes, but still standing at 3.2% in October. The persistent levels of inflation are still well above the Federal Reserve's goal of a 2% rate. And with that, let's bring in Mark Hamrick, Washington Bureau Chief and Senior Economic Analyst for Bankrate. Mark, good to see you this Friday. So what accounts for the rise in consumer confidence, even though inflation still remains very high?
Jenna, good to be with you. That's a lot of good news to digest in a single breath. Can we handle it? We also had stock prices closing at the highest of the year in reaction to that news. And you're wise, as always, to connect that to inflation, because what's happening is inflation's coming down. We're seeing gasoline prices at the lowest level in a long time. And I think that is really helping to lift the burden of this inflation suffering mentality that has really weighed on the minds and the pocketbooks of Americans. We recently did a survey at Bankrate, Jenna, that found that the majority of Americans, 6 in 10, feel like they are experiencing a recession, even though the technical definition for a recession is not being met. And so as we're getting better news on jobs, better news on inflation, seeing some prices coming down, principally gasoline, I think people are feeling better.
Yeah. So, people often look at the unemployment numbers and jobs report to see how the economy is doing. But, Mark, is unemployment really a lagging indicator both before and after a recession?
Well, that's true, but what I would say is that the real-time indicators that we have as well that tell us essentially what we're seeing and experiencing at the moment are in alignment with this. And so the reality is that the November jobs report told us that hiring was essentially steady from October, that the unemployment rate came down because of something that we don't always pay a lot of attention to, and that is because 500,000 people came back into the labor force, and a good number of them found employment. Along with that, wage growth is now outpacing the rate of inflation. Average hourly earnings up 4% over the past year, the rate of inflation somewhere around a 3% rise. But to benchmark that, Jenna, and you were ahead on this before a lot of other people, the inflation that was weighing on people. The fact is the consumer price index is still up 20% from pre-pandemic levels. So prices are high, but we're seeing some prices coming down. And so that's why there is a bit of relief, but we are not absolved of the curse of inflation and high prices.
Yeah. What do you make of the index of leading economic indicators, Mark, that's been down for 19 straight months? Could that actually be a warning sign of a downturn?
It might be viewed as a warning sign, Jenna, but it's not been a very reliable one, right? So we've been talking about the heightened risk of recession now since the first quarter of last year. And the reality is, as we say, the technical requirements for recession just simply haven't occurred. There still is an elevated risk of recession, but to the extent that we're looking at a essentially average growth rate here in the fourth quarter after a superb growth rate in the third quarter, the economy is avoiding that downturn. But to bring it back around, what we really need relief from is the inflation problem that we're all too familiar with.
Yeah. All right, Mark Hamrick with Bankrate. Always good to see you. Thank you, Mark. Have a great weekend.
Thank you. Happy holidays. Thank you, Jenna.
Same to you. And when we come back, Christmas decorations canceled in Bethlehem as pastors in the birthplace of Jesus call for a ceasefire and peace plan. As the war in the Middle East rages on, Christmas is canceled in Bethlehem, or at least it won't be celebrated as usual this year. The Bethlehem municipality, in the birthplace of Jesus, announced traditional Christmas decor in Manger Square will not be put up to show solidarity with those suffering in Gaza.
Even though Bethlehem, the Christians in Bethlehem are not involved in the battle in Gaza, what they feel is that as Bethlehemites, they don't want to come across as insensitive to the suffering of the Gaza civilians.
As the war in Gaza rages on, several Palestinian Christian leaders have been calling on the U.S. to support a ceasefire and peace plan. Dr. Jack Serra, president of Bethlehem Bible College, is one of them, and he joins us now from Jerusalem. Jack, welcome. So your college is in Bethlehem, the West Bank. You recently traveled, though, to Washington with a letter from different Christian leaders in Bethlehem urging a permanent ceasefire. Talk about the effect of this war so far on Palestinian Christians.
Well, thank you, Jenna. First, greetings to the viewers wherever they are from Jerusalem. I live in Jerusalem, but our ministry center is in Bethlehem with the Bethlehem Bible. And since day one of the war, the difficult situation that not only Gaza but the West Bank has been going through had to communities. For example, since day one of the war, Bethlehem has been shut down, and there's no tourism, and there's no entrance in and out for people, specifically from Jerusalem. So it made it harder for people to basically, commute and live their lives regularly as the war continues. And it is a tough times. We are located in Bethlehem. Many of our students go back and forth sometimes for their studies on regular days, but now they cannot do this.
Yeah, a lot of Christians here in the United States, they have sympathy for the innocent Palestinians, but they do disagree with calling for a ceasefire. Some even calling it anti-Semitic. Explain why you are calling for a permanent ceasefire, and how do you see that affecting the hostages and the concern that Hamas might attack again?
You started with saying how people in Bethlehem, or the Christians actually, the clergy in Bethlehem, have called for no Christmas decoration and no celebrations because they're mourning the death of over now 18,000 people, and it is continuous. This is in addition as well to the Israeli civilians that were killed. It's just so much death that had happened here. So, we didn't call for a unilateral. It's a bilateral ceasefire that, will be negotiated, that we talked with. And it has proven, that during our visit last week to Washington, it was during a time of truce when the Americans and the Qataris and the Egyptians were interfering into making negotiations for that, which means, there is a way other than war and things. And this week, we're supposed these weeks to celebrate Christmas.
Yeah.
Just imagine that all Christians, all the country. Christmas here is a national holiday in Palestine, and it was canceled because of the mourning over the many people that were killed. So the Christians have been writing and devastated by the image of death and destruction that we see on our land, regardless of who's the victim.
Yeah.
We lament the death of all peoples, Palestinians and Israelis.
Jack, I hate to cut you off, Jack. I'm so sorry. We are unfortunately out of time this evening, but we'd love to have you back sometime. Jack Serra, president of Bethlehem Bible College, thank you so much. And we'll be right back.
Thank you.
Finally tonight, this year marks the 800th anniversary of the first nativity scene. CBN's Abigail Robertson looks at how this tradition started.
Nativity scenes have become synonymous with the Christmas season, as each year millions put together recreations of the birth of Jesus. The tradition dates back to 1223, after St. Francis of Assisi visited the Holy Land and wanted to recreate what he saw for his friends and family back in Italy.
So St. Francis of Assisi went to Bethlehem and was moved by the nativity scene and wanted to help people to understand what it looked like, to get a feel for the humble nature of Jesus' birth.
At Christmas Mass, St. Francis staged a live reproduction of Jesus' birth with animals, actors, and a hay-filled manger outside the town of Greccio, Italy.
And he wanted to share with the people of Greccio this beautiful ceremony of the Nativity. And it's so interesting because the bales of hay that he put forward in front of this cave, actually, people would bring their animals, and it is said that if they ate from the hay, they would be healed from any illness that they have.
The birthplace of the first Nativity remains a cherished place today, complete with personal visits by Pope Francis. Manger scenes and reenactments have come a long way since those humble beginnings 800 years ago. In Washington, Faith and Liberty has brought Christmas to life for the past 20 years, with live actors and animals around the U.S. Capitol and Supreme Court. And Museum of the Bible is displaying 3 award-winning handmade manger scenes from the 2023 Nativity Crib Competition in Malta.
So it really forces you to reckon with just how real, right, the birth of Jesus was. That he came in human form and was born like anyone else, and Mary had to go through a lot.
For a beautiful nativity you can display in your home, Melissa Carey's Christmas cabinets turn the story of Jesus' birth into an Advent calendar.
And so I wanted to take the chaos out of Christmas. I wanted to make sure that people were having a meaningful, intentional Advent, where by Christmas morning they would be prepared to receive the beautiful gift of Jesus Christ.
Each day of Advent, you can open a drawer in the Christmas cabinet to find a character in the story of Christ's birth and a Bible verse and devotional that goes along with it. The cabinet goes beyond the usual nativity stars to include other important characters like Caesar Augustus and John the Baptist.
It is so important that people realize that the characters in the Bible, the people in the Bible, are real, factual, historical characters, not some made-up fairy tale.
And they make beautiful gifts to share with loved ones at Christmas time. While nativities now come in all shapes and sizes, one thing they have in common is helping bring a bit of joy at Christmas time as they remind us of the wondrous gift of Jesus Christ. Reporting from Museum of the Bible, Abigail Robertson, CBN News.
All right, thank you, Abigail. And that is going to do it for Faith Nation this evening. Thank you so much for joining us. Have a great weekend, and we'll see you right back here on Monday.